Kevin Costner has spent decades in Hollywood, long enough to see trends come and go, long enough to watch fame elevate people and just as quickly discard them. Through it all, he has remained a quiet observer, someone who rarely rushes to speak, but whose words carry weight when he does. When the conversation once turned to beauty, not the fleeting kind splashed across tabloids, but the deeper, lasting kind, Costner's reflections stood out. He didn't talk about rankings or superficial standards. Instead, he spoke about moments, presence, and the kind of beauty that lingers long after a scene ends. Over time, 8 women came to mind, not because they fit a single mold, but because each represented something rare and unforgettable. For Kevin Costner, beauty was never just about appearance. It was about how someone moved through the world, how they listened, how they carried their strength without needing to announce it. On film sets, he had seen stunning faces fade into the background, while others, perhaps less obvious at first glance, commanded the entire space. The women he named were not chosen because of hype or headlines, but because each one left an impression that time never erased. One of those women was known for her quiet intensity. On screen, she could say everything without speaking a single word. Costner admired how her beauty was tied to her emotional honesty, how audiences believed her because she believed herself. There was no performance in her presence, only truth. Watching her work reminded him that real beauty often comes from courage, the courage to be vulnerable in front of millions. Another woman on his list carried an entirely different energy. She was vibrant, full of warmth, the kind of person whose smile could change the mood of an entire room. Costner once reflected on how people gravitated toward her without realizing why. It wasn't just her looks, though those were undeniable. It was her joy, her openness, and the way she made others feel seen. In an industry that often rewards distance and mystery, she chose connection instead. And that choice made her unforgettable. There was also a woman whose beauty felt timeless, untouched by trends or eras. She could have existed in any decade and still commanded attention. Costner saw in her a kind of elegance that didn't rely on fashion or youth. It came from confidence earned through experience. She knew who she was, and she never apologized for it. That certainty, Costner believed, was one of the most beautiful qualities a person could possess. One name on the list surprised many people. Not because she wasn't admired, but because Costner's reasoning went deeper than expected. He spoke about her resilience, about how she navigated fame with grace even when the spotlight was unforgiving. Her beauty, in his eyes, came from endurance. From standing tall when narratives tried to define her. From choosing dignity over noise. That strength transformed the way he saw her, turning admiration into lasting respect. Another woman represented a kind of natural beauty that felt effortless. Costner recalled moments on set when she appeared without heavy makeup or elaborate styling, yet somehow seemed more radiant than anyone else in the room. It wasn't carelessness. It was comfort. She was comfortable in her own skin, and that ease translated into an undeniable presence. For Costner, this was a reminder that beauty often shines brightest when nothing is forced. There was also a woman. Beauty was deeply tied to her intellect. Conversations with her lingered long. After they ended, she challenged ideas, questioned assumptions, and brought depth into every interaction. Costner admired how her mind was as captivating as her appearance. In an industry that sometimes underestimates intelligence, she proved that sharp thinking and beauty were never opposites. They amplified each other. One of the most emotional choices on the list came from a woman who embodied kindness. Costner spoke about small moments rather than grand gestures, how she treated crew members, how she listened without interrupting, how she carried empathy into spaces that often lacked it. Her beauty, he believed, was reflected in the way she made people feel safer, calmer, more valued. It was a quiet beauty, but one that left the deepest mark. The final woman on Kevin Costner's list represented transformation. She evolved publicly, growing into herself in front of the world's eyes. Costner admired how she embraced change rather than fearing it. Her beauty was not static. It matured, deepened, and gained layers over time. Watching her journey reminded him that beauty is not about staying the same, but about becoming more fully who you are. What made Costner's reflections so compelling was not the names themselves, but the reasoning behind them. He never spoke about perfection. Instead, he talked about authenticity, about moments when beauty revealed itself unexpectedly through strength, kindness, intelligence, resilience, or quiet confidence. In a culture obsessed with surface-level standards, his perspective felt almost radical. Costner once hinted that working in Hollywood teaches you how misleading appearances can be. The camera can flatter or distort, elevate or diminish. A true beauty, he believed, cuts through all of that. It exists even when the lights are off. It shows up in how someone handles pressure, how they treat others when nothing is being filmed, how they remain themselves in an industry that constantly asks people to be something else. These 8 women, represented different paths to the same destination. None of them tried to fit into a single definition of beauty. They created their own. Some did it through strength, others through warmth, others through depth or grace. Together, they formed a mosaic of what beauty can truly look like when it's allowed to be human. Kevin Costner never claimed his view was universal. In fact, he acknowledged that beauty is deeply personal. What moves one person may leave another untouched. But that was precisely the point. His list was not meant to instruct, but to reflect. It was a glimpse into how a man shaped by decades of storytelling understood the power of presence. In the end, Costner's reflections say as much about him as they do about the women he admired. They reveal a man who values substance over spectacle, character over hype. Someone who has seen enough illusion to recognize authenticity when it appears. In naming the 8 most beautiful women ever, he wasn't defining beauty for the world. He was sharing moments when beauty found him quietly, unexpectedly, and stayed. And perhaps that's the real takeaway. Beauty isn't always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the calm one, the steady one, the one that remains long after the applause fades. Kevin Costner understood that, and in his reflections, he reminded everyone else to look a little deeper, to listen a little longer, and to remember that the most beautiful things are often the ones that don't ask to be noticed at all.